Hi, I'm Kate Weller, curator of the Schenectady County Historical Society. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our interview with historian David Cornelius. Make sure to join us for our 3rd annual Festival of Trees this week from November 26th through December 6th. And please don't miss our website, www.schist.org. Again, that's www.schist.org. Thank you.
Let me throw out some names and just get your reaction and their importance, significance. Samuel Champlain.
Well, as I find out...
We're celebrating him this year.
I understand, with him and Hudson both.
Right.
Hudson had the right tact, though. But Champlain probably would have. He was ordered to do what he did, and against his will, he joined with the Algonquins and the Mississaugas mostly, and some Abenaki too. Coming down into Iroquois country to do battle with the Iroquois.
In 1609.
1609.
Mm-hmm.
That was due to an agreement between the Indians and the French for this place to build Montreal. Okay, so in return for having the island for Montreal, they had to do this. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't Champlain's agreement in the beginning. And he was ordered to because the current governor was too ill to do it himself. All right, so Champlain did this against his better judgment, probably. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, Samuel de Champlain is the one who single-handedly lost North America for the French.
Some people might disagree with that.
Well, he came down, and the first day he met the Mohawks, he killed 9 Mohawk chiefs. It alienated the Iroquois from the French. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Iroquois were the strongest confederacy of Indians in North America. And as much as the French tried to split them up and tried to overpower them and tried to overcome their influence, they failed. Mm-hmm. And that's why. Because it goes right back to that day when they killed 9 chiefs. Henry Hudson didn't kill 9 chiefs. Mm-hmm. He took 4 chiefs and he actually brought them back.
Let me, since you brought that up, let me ask you about the Indians we refer to as St. Regis or praying Indians.
Well, those are the Ganawagga Indians. Oh no, St. Regis are Abenaki, but the Ganawagga Indians are the Mohawk. There's two
different... Who were converted to Catholicism?
Yes, the Ganawaggas were the ones that were here and were converted by the Jesuits in the 1650 to 60s, okay? And they set up a village of Christian Indians in Fonda, Ganawagga, at the Rapids. Mm-hmm. And Dean Snow did a dig there. It's really nicely laid out. The whole village is, there's stakes for the perimeter, there's stakes for the outlines of their longhouses and for the platforms for their beds. And so it's all marked out just how the village was built. Now, the first time I went up there was when I first went to the Ganajahalege immersion program. The first night after dinner, I took a drive up there and looked around and took a cigar to smoke the site tobacco. And I came back, and the next day I was talking to Tom, and I said, Tom, I said, there's a peculiar thing about that village up there. He said, what's that? I says, all of the longhouses are going the wrong way. Because Iroquois longhouses were always built east-west, as was their confederacy, and as are the winds, because then the wind can blow through the longhouse and take the smoke out. These longhouses at Ganawagga were built north and south. The wind wasn't going to blow the smoke out. God knows how they lived in there. But
what does that indicate?
Well, I asked Tom that, and he just looked at me and he said, they were Christians.
Oh. That explains it, I guess?
Well, they wanted to be different.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't going to be traditional, they were going to be different. So they built their houses differently in spite of the fact that building them east-west had a reason.
You threw out 2 names there. Let me just identify. Dean Snow is a Penn State professor.
He is now. He used to be Albany.
Right.
He's the dean of the anthropology department at Penn State.
Who
And
lived in Burn Hills for a while.
for a while, and I know Dean through the Iroquois Research Conference. I've attended a number of times, and I think I'll probably do a paper up there this next season, next year.
And Tom Porter.
Tom Porter is Segawanunquas. He is a retired chief of the Mohawk and the spiritual leader of not only the Mohawk, but most Native Americans. He is a very influential spiritual person, and people from all over the world come to see Tom.
And he lives right up west of Amsterdam?
West of Fonda.
Fonda.
Ganajahalege, which is the actual Mohawk word for Kanajahari. Okay, and the village was, it's on the site of the old Mohawk, or Montgomery County
The college.
old age home.
Oh, okay.
Not the college, it was the old age home, and it got too bad for keeping people in, so they gave it to the Indians, and or sold it to the Indians. So anyway, it's the site of one of Fonda's, Jealous Fonda's house, I think, one of the Fondas, and it was the site of an Indian village before that, and as I said, there were villages on both sides of the river, and across the river in Sprakers, there's another village site. So, to get back to that idea,
How many people live up there with Tom?
Not too many.
Not too many?
no, originally, 1993, I was a member of Keepers of the Circle at that time, and we collected food and clothing and furniture and all kinds of supplies we could to help get them established in the first place. So I made about 10 truckload drives with my truck full of furniture and things up back and forth up there before the water pump gave out. And there were a number of people then. There was probably 15 or 20 people. And now there's probably mostly Tom's family and a few others, and other people come all the time.
Okay. Let's get back to my name dropping. Joseph Brandt.
Well, he was a half Mohawk Indian. He was not ever a chief. People get that wrong. He was the brother-in-law to William Johnson via his sister, Molly Brandt. And Joseph Brandt might have been half white. Anyway, Joseph Brandt was educated via William Johnson through the school at the Wheelock School in Connecticut, and he became a Freemason, and he was fairly well educated, and he translated the Bible too. He was another one that translated parts of the Bible, or maybe the whole Bible. And so he had a very strong connection to the English, and during the Revolutionary War, he sided with Johnson's son, because William Johnson had died by then, and took about 100 Mohawk warriors with him. That's it. Only about 100. And everybody thinks that he took the whole Iroquois nation with him. No, he took about 100 Mohawk warriors, because the Mohawk were married with the British. Okay, with Johnson. Johnson was systematically stealing every piece of land the Mohawks had, by the way. And so by the Revolutionary War time, the Mohawks only possessed the villages of Fort Hunter and Indian Castle. That's it. They owned nothing. The Cater-Ross Patent was the last thing they had, which included Saratoga and Providence and probably the Sacandaga, Town of Day, all that area up there. And that was fraudulently taken in a deed in 1700 or so, and the Indians refused to recognize the deed. And William Johnson eventually coerced them somehow to recognizing the deed and giving away that last piece of land that they had. And if you look at the property deeds ownership back in the 1700s, you'll see that all of the Schoharie Valley and the Mohawk Valley and the Eastern Mohawk Valley and the Sacandaga Valley, they're all owned by Johnson and his friends.
So William Johnson was my next name I was going to mention. Do you look upon him favorably? I think not, but,
No,
okay.
I don't. Iroquois generally don't look at Joseph Brant favorably. He was a traitor. The Iroquois were supposed to be neutral, and were neutral, up until 1779 when Washington burned down all their villages. Okay, the Iroquois, there were some Indians that went and fought for the English. Mostly they did scouting, but it wasn't en masse. Okay, the Seneca were the ones that were hot to go and fight. So there were quite a few Seneca scouts and some small war parties that went with the British, but not really. The Seneca in general were not even fighting even then. The Onondagas were desperately trying to keep neutrality. The Cayugas tried to be neutral. The Oneidas were leaning to the Americans, but feigning neutrality. And actually they were neutral, except for the scouts, etc. They were.
Did they have a real good alternative? The
Well-
Iroquois nation at the outset of the American Revolution? They just had to kind of wait and see, or what would you have done?
Their system of government requires unanimity. So unless everybody is unified in their vote, the 50 main chiefs of the legislature, they don't do it. They don't take a position.
Which is why you call Joseph Brant a traitor.
Right.
Because, okay.
Right. And that's the way most Iroquois look at it. Now, that's not to say that after 1779, when Sullivan and Clinton went through the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga territory, burnt all of their villages, chopped down all of their orchards, burnt all of their stored food in their fields, they didn't take warfare then. Because, yes, they did. Then, en masse, all of those Indians became British fighters. But wouldn't you?
Yeah. Sure. How about Corn Planter? Who was he?
Corn Planter. He revived the old religion. Alcohol had become a problem. And Corn Planter and his cousin, Handsome Lake, between Handsome Lake and Corn Planter, they resurrected the old religion with a touch of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, so Alcoholics Anonymous worked its way in there, but they revived the old religion, and they call it the Gaia-Weo, and that's what Tom Porter believes in, and I don't. I go back to the Gaian-Aragoa, which is the great law of peace that the peacemaker gave us. All right, so I stay away from the AA subject. Although alcoholism was a problem in my family, it's not with me, and it wasn't my father gave it up, so my father was saved from it. But his three brothers all died from alcohol-related illnesses, and I believe his father did, but his father died when he was 12, so I never knew. So alcoholism is a problem. And
What was the time frame for Corn Planter?
oh, let me think. 1800-ish.
Okay. Let me go back a little bit, just to mention a man dear to our hearts here in Schenectady, Lawrence the Indian. What do you know about him?
Well, he was a Mohawk Indian. I don't know where he got the name Lawrence from. I don't believe he actually did have the name Lawrence, but after the raid on Schenectady, most people know that story. I'm not going to go through it, except for to add that the Mohawk Indians that lived in Schenectady at the time were unharmed. They being the Van Slykes. Harriet, I think her name was, Van Slyke, was married to the minister, or a minister. He died, her children died, but she did not. Her brother was actually a trader with the Indians, half Indian himself, and not only wasn't he hurt, his house wasn't hurt. So they, Iroquois, or the Mohawks especially, but Iroquois do not fight other Iroquois. This is why Joseph Brant is looked upon as a traitor. You don't fight your brethren, ever. So even with the Caughnawagas, going back to the Ganawagas, that's who these people were. It came down in 1690. They were the Christian Indians from Fonda that had gone north in 1675.
They were Mohawks.
They were Mohawks. So when they came back down, they did not fight other Mohawks. And so they wouldn't do it. Anyway,
Lawrence.
Lawrence was also a Mohawk, and he led a group of Schenectadians on a rescue mission to get the prisoners back from the French and the Indians headed north. And they caught up to them, I guess, just before they got back up to Montreal, but they didn't have much success as far as bringing people back.
When you're at the maybe farm or out at a historic site in Schoharie or some other place, you have a little presentation.
I have multiple presentations.
Well, give us an idea of what you might say to people, how long you actually speak for, what kind of props do you have?
Okay. What I do in general, is a general New York State Indian program, okay, to explain that the Mohicans weren't Mohawks. They didn't even speak the same language. They were more related to what we call the Delaware, who called themselves the Lane Lenale, or the Yanamis, the Mansis, okay, or the Wappingers. All of those people are related. Let me get back to the difference here. The Iroquoian speakers migrated up here maybe 3,000 years ago or so, and forced the Algonquian speakers out of their way. Okay, so the Mohicans were pushed off of the Schoharie Valley and most of the Catskills and Saratoga, which was theirs. And they resented it. Still do, I'm sure. And so the Mohawk were actually the front line in the advancement of these Iroquoian speakers, who might even be mound builders, okay, or have some mound building.
And what is mound building?
Well, the mound builders are known in the Ohio Valley because they were there for 1,000 years before they came up into New York. There are burial mounds and ceremonial mounds built different places, and stone mounds some places, depending on what material you have handy. And there is evidence of these mound builders all the way to the Atlantic Ocean in New Hampshire and in Canada. And so actually the Mohawk were way up the St. Lawrence River. When Jacques Cartier came over, there was Mohawk people he ran into. Okay, but by the time Champlain came over, the Mohawk people weren't there anymore. I believe they got disease and they abandoned the area. Okay, what you're going to find in schools is that the Mohawk were up there first and then they came down here. No, they were here, they had expanded up there. Okay, but I think disease hit them when Cartier came, and as a result of that, they abandoned the area and came back down here. Or some of them.
They picked up the disease?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did. Every Indian tribe picked up disease from any contact, really.
Get back to your presentation.
My presentation. Okay, on New York State Indians, the Iroquois Confederacy, the Peacemaker, the lifestyles. I follow a program set up by the Education Department, but I fill in the blanks and I give the background. Look, not only do the Indians grow corn, beans, and squash, they invented corn, beans, and squash. They invented the plant. They invented the way to grow it. Okay, Indians had a 3-hour workday. That's all they had to do, and they had everything they needed. Okay, with the exception of an occasional roundup of deer or something like that. Or in the spring when the fish are running. They'd work all day trying to dry out fish so that for storage. So there are certain times of the year when they harvest, they're busy, but otherwise they basically don't, they don't like to work. So planting corn, beans, and squash the way they do, they plant a hill, they fertilize it with dead fish, and the corn grows up on a stalk and the beans grow up on a stalk. I was picking beans this year like this. off the tops of my corn stalks. Okay, so this is the first year I've actually grown Indian style, and it works good. I'm going to do it again. So you plant corn and beans, and then around the hillside you plant your squashes. Not, acorn squash, cantaloupes, watermelons, pumpkins, summer squash, all those squashes with vines. And then the squashes with the vines, they spread out all over the ground. They got thorny spines to keep the animals out. They got big leaves which shades the soil so that when the rain comes in, it doesn't dry out. The sun can't dry out the soil so quick. They smother all the weeds. So once you plant this, you don't have to do anything until you go pick it. Okay? It weeds itself, it waters itself, and it fertilizes itself, because beans give off nitrogen, which the squash and the corn require to grow on, as does the dead fish they threw in the bottom of the hole.
So you're telling us they were more farmers and growers and gatherers as opposed to the killers or the hunters?
No, yes, definitely. Let me go this way. Everybody thinks, especially the kids, that when I say, what do you think the Indians ate? Okay, well, meat is the first thing, because everybody thinks the Indians went out and killed deer, which they did. One time a year, they would harvest deer, and they would take probably 20 or 25 deer at a time, and harvest and tan the hides, and it would be in the winter when you could store the meat. Because in the summertime, you can't hang a deer carcass up any place and keep it for any length of time. So they didn't kill deer in the summertime. They killed they ate red meat in the wintertime. Bears. Oh, gotta wrap up, huh? Okay, let me go back to the pyramid. 75% of a native's diet was food he grew. 15% of a native's diet was fish he caught, or harvested, or farmed, because they would build ponds and farm fish in ponds. And 10% was red meat. Okay, so very little red meat.
Dave Cornelius from Schenectady, thank you for spending some time with us today.